Hey there, dear viewers. Welcome to Obsessed with Werewolves. I'm so glad you're here because I know you, like me, have a passion for all things werewolf. From their captivating tales to their mysterious nature, we're going to explore it all. So, let's dive right in and satisfy our obsession together. Chapter 1. Harley. Get back here. Unable to hold her laughter, Harley giggled into her tiny hand and crouched closer to the tree. Matthias would never find her at this rate. He headed the opposite way. Hide and seek just wasn't his thing. She peeked around the tree. The noon summer sun hit her back even through the shade and made the backs of her knees sweat. Lucky for her, she remained downwind. With her older brother's strong wolf nose, he'd find her in seconds if the wind was against her back. Her pink shirt started to stick to her in places, and she used the back of her wrist to wipe at the sweat under her bangs. The silver butterfly necklace her daddy gave her felt cool against her neck. Across her family's meadow, twigs snapped under the weight of a larger person. Geez, Matthias trampled through these woods like a dinosaur. Didn't he know to be careful? No wonder no one else but Willie ever wanted to play with him. At 12, her big brother had finally shifted. After the first shift, most wolves become clumsy for a while before they get used to their new bodies. Her daddy said it wouldn't happen to her. You're too smart and pretty for that, Harley. He told her, my beautiful little genius. She couldn't wait for the day when she finally shifted. Mommy said she'd have white and tan fur like her, and that she'd run fast. She really wanted that. That way, she could finally beat Matthias and Willie in a chase, except she was only 6. She had a long time to wait. Harley, Matthias shouted. Ollie oxen free. Free. Already. They only called that out when they wanted to give up the game. Matthias always gave up early. He was such a wimp. Harley stepped out from behind the tree. He never checked out near the edge of the property line. Matthias was always too afraid to cross the line and get yelled at by Mommy and Daddy. Matthias, she called out, spotting him a couple yards away. Dimly, she wondered how he could be over there when she so clearly heard him behind her before. You always... Her brother jogged over to her. Halfway over, he froze. His focus locked on something behind her, fear spreading over his features. It was probably a butterfly. Matthias hated butterflies. But she thought they were the prettiest of all the bugs with all their different colors. How could you hate them? Harley stepped closer to him, crossing her little arms over her chest. Now she was going to have to be it. And Matthias never hid well. From behind her, a bush rustled. Harley. Matthias' eyes were wide, his face white, and he whimpered. She turned around. It was probably some cute little animal that just wanted to play with them. Her feet stopped. An animal stood there among the wildlife, but not a friendly one. A black wolf crept from the bushes at the property line, leaning on its back paws. Its bright green and yellow eyes narrowed as it stalked closer. She stumbled backward, her foot catching on a tree root. Her butt hit the ground. The wolf's nose scrunched as it extended its teeth and let out a long, deep, menacing growl. Goosebumps ran up and down her arms. Harley scrambled to her feet. Their daddy warned them what to do when they saw a wolf that didn't want to be their friends. But she couldn't remember. Harley, Matthias whispered behind her. Back up. She followed her brother's command, backing up until her shoulder touched Matthias' stomach. What do we do? Slowly, her brother stepped in front of her, his gangly body much taller than hers. He took a breath and straightened his shoulders, trying to make himself look bigger than the wolf. The wolf paced closer. Sleek, dark fur glinted against the sun. It exhaled through its nose, cocking its head to the side. The eyes. They would haunt her for the rest of her life. There was a smartness about them, a mind behind the animal instincts. What passed after that were tiny details she could barely piece together. The wolf surged forward. Her brother shoved her backward, screaming at her to run. Run, Harley. His form shook with the upcoming change. She fled. Tears leaked down her cheeks. From the distance, Matthias' scream got caught in a roar. Her feet guided her to her house. Her parents were there. They would know what to do. Mommy and Daddy always knew what to do. Before she could get closer, her house burst apart in a mass of smoke and flames. The force sent her to the ground, all the hairs on her arms and legs standing straight. Even as a small child, she knew she had to pick herself up, had to keep going. So that's what she did. Except this time, she ran the other way, and ran, and ran. Screams, howls of agony, her own labored breathing, blood, and then eventually, nothing. The alarm buzzed on the nightstand, belting out keys somewhere only we know. Harley jolted with a start, her heart galloping a mile a minute. When she finally came back to herself after that dream, her breath slowed. Not a dream, she reminded herself. A memory. The watch on her wrist said 9:55 a.m. A groan came from her mouth and she rubbed at her eyes. It took 5 more minutes, but she finally got out of bed and headed down the hall for a shower. Downstairs she could hear the chatter and buzz of people alive and awake. The clatter of dishes being moved around in the sink told her breakfast had just finished. What kind of freaky people got up before 10 on a Saturday morning? She shook her head, stripping and jumping in the shower. Weirdos. 13 years ago, her parents and brother had been mauled and killed by a group of werewolves. It happened on a regular summer day, which still seemed wrong to her. Everything about the day was so normal. How could such a horrible occurrence go down when the sun shined and everyone was happy? After the attack, Harley went to stay with her Aunt Tracy in her pack in Massachusetts for quite a while. Aunt Tracy and her mate, Uncle Eric, made it clear that she would be welcome to stay as long as she wanted. Not that she really wanted to, but she knew that eventually she'd have to move back in with her old pack. It was where she was born, and it was where her loyalties lay. And so she jumped on a plane and came here to Kensington, a medium-sized town set in the middle of nowhere. Kensington was surrounded by trees on all sides and actually quite pretty. She could see why her kind would love the place. Moderate temperatures, set near the mountains, but not close enough to have to worry about any mudslides or avalanches, and far enough away from any big cities to rouse any suspicion. Her plane came in around 4:30 in the morning, so it was about 5:30 before she actually arrived at the pack house. It would take a while to slowly work her mind into accepting the new environment. She told herself she could do that after the sun came up. Natalie, the beta's mate, had been the one up at the ungodly hour to welcome and greet her and show her a room. Natalie's kindness almost seemed to be too much for Harley. She welcomed the 19-year-old with open arms, encouraging her to get some sleep and come down to meet up with the pack when she was ready. Living in the pack house was like living in the house of a grandparent who had more than 8 children. While only one family actually lived there, there would always be other people coming in to visit stay for a few days. In the Will Creek pack house, the Alpha and Beta resided with both of their families. Yet the home had originally been built with the idea that it would have to encompass visiting pack families as well as hold pack gatherings and parties. Besides the main families, all other pack members stayed in their own homes around the wooded town. Before she jumped a plane to get there, she'd called and had a nice long talk to Alpha Mark about her living arrangements. Though he was intimidating and somewhat hard to talk to on the phone, she'd gotten enough information to convince her it'd be a good idea to stay in the pack house until she fully decided she wanted to permanently stay with the Willow Creek pack. No pressure, Alpha Mark had said over the phone. Pack house is always open. After her shower, Harley blow-dried her long brown hair into some form of organized chaos and pulled out her makeup bag to her eyes. She'd like to tell people that natural beauty just came to her, but that was never the case. What was something people put on when meeting the pack leaders for the first time after so many years. In the end, she slipped on a blue tee and her best pair of jeans. When she finally looked suitable enough for company, she glanced at herself in the mirror. It had been a rough last couple years for her, but now it was time to get herself into gear and start her own future. The hallways directly outside her bedroom still caught her off guard. All the floors were lined with hardwood and the walls painted a careful beige. Pictures of pack members and landscapes hung and organized in modern frames. Keeping such a large expanse of household clean and put together seemed like a hard feat, but someone around here did a great job. Down the hallway rested a set of stairs with iron railings and marble fixtures. It was only one set of many and paled in comparison to the foyer stairs. Harley stepped carefully into what appeared to be the kitchen. The night before, she didn't take much time to go over the entire house, which was almost impossible in itself due to the enormity of the home, and had missed the opulence of the kitchen when she passed through. The kitchen was a large area set with black granite countertops, dark wooden cabinets, and top-notch appliances. In the middle rested a long fur-chair island and sink. The room itself extended further, transitioning into a nice dining room with a long, extended table for a big group. The second she entered the area, she realized that already there were more people than she accounted for. Her eyes caught on Natalie, who grinned at her and gestured her over. Relieved, she rushed over to the woman. "Good morning, Harley," she said politely, her hands wrist-deep in water from the sink. "Why don't you go reacquaint yourself with the alpha, Mark?" she suggested, her voice hushed. "He's over at table with my mate, Oliver." Harley nodded. It would be a good impression to self-introduce herself to the Alpha Ada. Okay, thanks. And grab some breakfast, Natalie urged. Harley frowned at that. She'd never had someone fuss about her before. Yes, she'd stayed with her aunt and uncle, but they'd been detached the entire time she stayed with them. She had eventually found out why her mother and Tracy never really got along and eventually split ways. Harley must have reminded her aunt too much of her mother, and as such, didn't get much attention or consideration. Near the head of the table, two men sat. The people mingling about had slowly edged away and out of the room, leaving only those cleaning up. Harley twisted her fingers and bit her lip as she came up to them high. She said, clearing her throat, "Come on, Harley, you got this. Alpha Mark, I'm Harley Pierce. Thank you for letting me stay here." She kept her head bowed slightly, in respect. The Alpha had gray hairs floating at the edges of his dark hair and a strong jaw. Combined with the intensity of the aura around him, the intimidating factor almost became too much. Over the phone was hard enough. In person, almost impossible. Next to him, the beta was not much better. The biggest distinguishing feature about him was his crooked nose. She had no idea how Natalie could be married to someone so dominant. However, when they looked back at her, only kindness and warmth spread through their features. Harley, the Alpha nodded to her. "I'm so glad you're back here with us. Welcome home." Home. Did she really have a home after the first one blew up? She swallowed hard and inclined her head. "Thank you, sir. Make yourself comfortable. We'll talk more details later, when you're more settled," he told her. She repeated her gratitude. "May I?" She pointed to a chair next to them. "Of course." On the table rested a plate of bacon, a bowl of hash browns, and some more orange juice. She helped herself, putting some food in her stomach for what would definitely be a big day. The Alpha and Beta continued their conversation. When does Jamie finish her semester? The Beta, Oliver asked. Next week, Alpha Mark replied with a sigh. She's been all over me about switching colleges. Oliver chuckled. I can't imagine. I don't know if she's ready for that. She needs to work herself into the pack more. Alpha Mark snagged a piece of bacon from the plate. Get a job, maybe. She'll have all summer to figure it out. I suppose so. They trailed off into more conversation, and it wasn't until Harley had finished eating and scooped up her plate that a familiar name came up. Any word on Will Gray? Oliver asked. The Alpha leaned back in his chair. He just cleaned up that group of rogues near the north of us and should be back in a couple days. We get the most. William Gray. Harley would know that name anywhere. When she was little, she called him Willie, and only years later would she realize why he hated it so much. She snorted softly. Any 12-year-old would get mad at being dubbed a male anatomy part. Will Gray used to be her brother Matthias' best friend. The two were inseparable, joined at the hip. After the attack, it was Will's parents who offered to act as her guardian while they tracked down her aunt and uncle. Will's parents also offered to take her in permanently, but somehow that idea got shot down. He probably didn't even remember her. One of the only few people in the pack she could accurately remember, and he most likely wiped her from his mind. The trauma of losing your best friend so young could do that. The idea that she could be so easily forgotten put a pang in her heart, one she chose to ignore. Will Gray. Harley found herself speaking up. What does he do? The Alpha appeared surprised at her line of questioning, but answered it anyway. Will is our lead rogue hunter. He takes care of any problems we have with rogue wolves and removes the threat out. In other words, a killer. He's quite a magnificent kid. Oliver mused. His parents are pretty proud. I'm sure they are. She mumbled. Every pack needs a rogue hunter. The Alpha stated. We got lucky with that one. One of the best in the area. They went to other topics after that. When she finished eating, Harley snatched up her plate and took it to the sink to wash it. Honey, I can get that. Natalie smiled delicately at her. For how nice she was, Harley started to get frustrated with the way she talked to her. Like she was in a fragile state of mind. It happened a lot around her. She'd spent a good chunk of her life running away from her past. The problem was, gossip and news traveled pretty fast. As a result, most of the packs around the area had heard about the attack. As a result, she could officially call herself infamous, the girl to survive a rogue attack. The kind of thing didn't happen often. Consequently, most of the wolves she'd met treated her differently when she met and interacted with them. Not in a good way, always in a gentle, somber way. Like she was so dainty and easily breakable that she couldn't handle the simplest things. Exhibit A, Natalie apparently thinking that she couldn't emotionally handle washing her own plate. Instead of blowing up at her, though, Harley shrugged. It's okay. I've got it. Natalie didn't say much after that. She let it go and continued to work in silence, which was a relief. Harley finished cleaning her mess and decided to explore the pack house for a little bit. It was around noon, with most of the pack members around the home either doing some type of chore or leisure activity. When she passed people, she remained polite, introducing herself to those she hadn't met. Most of the others just gave her a nod or looked at her oddly. Jeez, she was just a new pack member. Did they usually stare at newcomers? The sun beat down on the yard, giving off a bit of heat. Lucky for her, it wasn't too bad that she'd be sweating. She had hoped to keep herself somewhat together today to give off a decent first impression. The pack house was a huge federal colonial-style home set into the edge of forest land. Made of brick, A home expanded to form to separate wings and could most likely house an upwards of about 40 to 50 people. The pack was much bigger than that, but, like Harley's family, most of the pack members with a mate and/or children often opted to find their own housing. However, the pack and many other packs often allowed any friendly wolf in need of a stay a place to rest their head at night. And how could they not want to? The pack house itself covered acres of land. The property line went far off into the distance. If that wasn't enough, the grounds were kept very prim with evenly cut grass in the front yard and an open pool in the backyard. Harley took the time to familiarize herself with her new surroundings. She wasn't sure how long she'd be staying with the pack. That didn't mean she was going to trap herself in her room and ignore everyone else. So she set off carefully into the forest to calm her curiosity about how far back the property line really went. If she could have transformed into wolf, she would have. She'd heard many tales about the glorious feeling of being able to embrace your animal and running free. Truth was, Harley would probably never know what that feels like. Immediately, she thrust that thought from her mind. The topic of her wolf would never be a happy, encouraging topic, and as such, she avoided talking about it or even thinking about it when she could. Instead, she allowed her feet to lead her where they made, and eventually she found herself deep into the back forest. Near the edge of the pack house border rested a small creek that ran and bubbled with water. Harley set herself on the ground on a tiny patch of grass and crossed her legs. The gentle movement and babbling of the clear creek water soothed her. For however hard these first couple of days would be here with her family's pack, she knew that at least she'd have a place to come back to. Chapter 2. In most novels, when a character fights their way through the woods, it is exactly that, a fight. And while Harley read a lot of books with a main hero or heroine goes trampling through the forest, the idea of someone actually full out running through the mass of trees and underbrush was somewhat comical. For one, the canopy of trees overhead blocked out most of the sun. Save for a few spots where the layers of trees were less thick, almost no sunbeams seeped through. Poor visibility made it hard to see much past her face. On top of that, the underbrush of wildflowers, twisty flattened weeds, and cracked fallen tree pieces could damper any walking. Her only advantage really was the fact that being raised with a pack gave her a lot of experience with navigating through the trees. Yet all that experience did nothing for her panic attacks. Because of her past, woods tended to make her a bit nervous. She'd long since convinced herself to work through it. After all, her whole world revolved around woods and forests where animals could roam freely. And she really did love the beautiful qualities of some parts like the creek. But if she were being completely honest with herself, she had to admit that her fear still existed and that being in the woods any time after the sun set, even though the attack and during the day scared the everlasting shit out of her. Harley took a deep breath and counted to 5 on the inhale and exhale. There would be no panic attacks today. Though she really didn't have much control over it, she hardened herself and stayed adamant about making sure there wouldn't be one. She headed back towards the pack house from the creek. Stepping over a rather large tree root, she placed her foot down on the ground. Surprised, the ground jutted off into a sudden drop. She stumbled forward, barely catching herself on a tree. Geez, I'm such a sea-less. It wouldn't be as bad if the sun weren't setting. Darkness settled in and slowly casted the canopy of trees into the night. Harley didn't have the type of senses that the other wolves had. If she did, that tree root wouldn't have been as much of a surprise. Looking back at the offending root, she continued forward, only to slam into something and fall backward. Hard. Oh, a petite blonde grabbed at her shoulder where Harley collided with her. Harley scrambled upward, putting out a hand to help her up. The girl ignored it and got up on her own. She brushed dirt off her shirt. Newbies. Always a mess. She muttered under her breath. Even without werewolf senses, she could still hear her. Harley tried not to take offense. Much, Hi, Harley twisted her fingers. Sorry. I didn't mean to. The girl waved her off, rather rudely. Whatever. You, Harley. Yeah. How'd she know? I'm Jamie. It was an awkward meeting if Harley'd ever seen one. What are you doing out here? Jamie tossed her long blonde hair over one shoulder. She scrutinized Harley from head to toe. My dad sent me out here. Wants to see you. She shrugged delicately. Or something. Okay. Harley looked around, the area suddenly confusing to her. Could you point me in the right direction? Jamie rolled her eyes and pointed to her right. Harley gave her a nod and headed off towards the direction of the setting sun. Thanks. She threw over her shoulder. Something must have gone wrong. The sun had since set and she still hadn't stumbled onto the pack house. Jamie couldn't have pointed her in the wrong direction. Right. She was a wolf. She had to know these woods like the back of her hand. The girl seemed a bit less than conversational, but definitely not mean. And they'd just met. There's no way she'd purposefully led her in the wrong direction. She refused to believe it. Night settled in and Harley's nerves began to fry. She was alone, in the forest, at night. It was like every horror movie set brought to life. God, why did she decide it was a good idea to go exploring? She slowed down, her eyes searching the darkness for any hint of civilization. Instead, the trees pressed in on her and became dancing shadows of pale, crooked bony hands and twisted malnourished torsos. Against her control, her chest squeezed tight. She took a deep breath and attempted to fight off the chill seeping through her bloodstream. All the fears and memories of the attack blurred in her mind. Her heart raced faster. The darkness plays tricks, she reminded herself. Darkness lies. They're not really there. Her breath came out in gasps, her blood pounding in her ears, and she whirled around in a half circle. The pack house had their lights on by now. All she had to do was find it. Something near her shifted. Bushes whispered as leaves rubbed together. A breath caught in her throat and tangled there with her heart. From the trees, wings rustled as a bird took off. Deep breath. Harley. There is not one else in this forest except your stick self. Her feet took her farther and farther into the distance. She stopped and looked around again. Maybe it was time to switch directions. She tried that. Eventually her feet began to ache and she sat down. Her head found her hands. How was she ever going to get out of here? Behind her, right behind her, came a soft growl. She jumped, spun, and tripped onto her butt. There, from the endless darkness, two yellow-green eyes glowed now. Backing up, a whimper escaped her throat. Suddenly, it was like the attack all over again. 13 years, but they'd finally come back to finish the job. And this time, she didn't have Matthias to protect her. Her back hit a tree, trapping her. The bark bit into her skin through her clothes. The wolf, a gray-brown animal with exposed teeth, crept closer. This is it, she thought. And all at once she wanted nothing more than to fall to the ground, sobbing, "This is how I die." The wolf's warm breath and in her face. She tilted her head to the side, squeezing her eyes shut. If she was going to die, if this would be her end, she sure as hell didn't want to see it. A cold, wet nose touched her cheek. A whine followed. The wolf stepped back. What? Harley dimly watched as the wolf's form twisted and turned to its other form. And then, the distinct outline of a girl stood in front of her. Harley, Harley. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I thought you were an intruder. The girl lifted her hands, palms out in a calming gesture. Hey, I'm sorry. She sat slowly onto the ground, naked as the day she was born. Harley could only tell because her pale skin reflected brightly like the moon. Meanwhile, Harley fought back the pressure on her chest and tried to take deep breaths. Who? The girl pointed to herself. Me. I'm Bailey. She flashed straight white teeth. Alpha's been looking for ya. Relief seeped slowly through Harley. This girl, Bailey, was with the pack. She'd help her get back. Oh, thank God. Good thing I wandered a bit on my patrol tonight. Bailey glanced around. Did you get lost? Harley swallowed hard. Nodded. How do you know my name? Bailey smiled kindly, almost sorrowful at the question. Darlin', everyone around here knows you. Before she could even scrape up a reply to that, Bailey stood up, rather gracefully too. Come on, let's get you back. It was hard, but Harley forced herself to follow a stranger back to safety. She avoided the forest for days afterward. Chapter 3. On the morning Will Gray came back, Harley slept in. In fact, it was the shouts of happy people that woke her out of a solid REM sleep. They're home. Somebody yelled. Harley flinched, coming straight from another nightmare of the attack. It was all she ever dreamed about these days, and she could feel the sticky sweat that layered her body. The front door slammed loudly. Harley groaned and clutched the pillow tighter over her head. Why do people always get up so blasted early? The clock read 11:35 a.m. Oops, maybe not too early. It took her almost half an hour to get ready. She pulled a simple shirt from her only suitcase and donned on some mascara. After a quick brush of her teeth and hair, she deemed herself minimally presentable. She'd stayed up for a decent time last night fighting with the idea of whether Will Gray would remember her or not. Finally, she came to the conclusion that he wouldn't. Not only because she had long since aged and matured, but because Will had always been Matthias' friend. Not hers. He'd most likely long forgotten Matthias, kid sister. Downstairs was a flurry of activity. Pack members strolled around greeting and welcoming those who came back. The kitchen had been downright chaotic, with the women scrambling to start a welcoming meal. The friendliness and warmth that members passed along made her feel cold and alone. She'd never be welcomed back with the same intensity. There wasn't enough familiarity between her and the pack. At this rate, there might never be. She would forever be a stranger living in their home. Harley. Natalie looked up from the pot she stirred on the stove. Can you go out and help them unload? Guess today she was just going to be the manual labor and the background decoration. She made her way over to the front door, glancing behind at the hustle and bustle of the kitchen. At least they asked for her help. The front door stood wide open, and through it she could see the nice cars and trucks parked on the circle drive. Males and some females unloaded boxes of supplies and suitcases from cars. As she stepped up to the door, a man stepped through with a large stack of boxes. He didn't see her small frame, so Harley had to scramble out of the way before he stepped all over her. Another dirty blonde male carried in a box behind him. Harley almost careened into him. She ducked out of the way at the last moment. Whoa, sorry. The guy coming in glanced over his box at her. A smile flitted onto his face. Well, hello there. His tone was warm as honey. She took a moment to really look at him. The guy was fit and carried himself with an easy grace and confidence. He wore a simple brown button-up and jeans. A cap covered his head, though he wore it backwards. Harley eyed the large, seemingly heavy box in his hands. Do you need help? The big guy waved her off. Nah, I'm good. Thanks. She glanced over his shoulder. Is there a lot left? The guy shrugged. Not really. There's one more set, but I think Will's got it covered. Harley tensed at the name. He doesn't remember you. She had to repeat the phrase again in her mind until her body relaxed. She'd spent so much of the last 13 years trying to forget the defining moment in her life. Will wasn't there at the time. He still had been Matthias' best friend. Pieces of her past were already sneaking into her new life with her family's pack. She didn't like that. It'd be better. Easier. She could just wake up one morning without any memories of the day her family was brutally murdered. That way she wouldn't have that constant throbbing ache in her heart every morning she woke up. I'm Cameron, by the way. Call me Cam. Harley. She gave him a small smile because hello. He was still hot. Another figure stepped through the doorway, but before she could investigate, something slammed into her left side. She stumbled, barely catching herself on the wall next to her. Jamie flew forward towards the front door. Will. Kim shifted the box in his hands. Hey, you okay? She barely nodded. Instead, her eyes and focus found the man Jamie gushed to. And a man he really was. Will had obviously grown into his looks. He was a good-looking kid back in the day. There were pictures to prove it, but nothing compared to the glory of what he was now. It was a struggle to get her attention back to Cam, but she did. All the while feeling the strength of his presence. It unnerved her. Kim gestured with a tilt of his head for her to follow him. She did without hesitation. Anything to get away from Will. And Jamie's sickingly sweet tone. So you knew here? Harley shrugged. The answer seemed obvious to both of them, but it was a place to start. Yeah, she said, stepping carefully aside to avoid the arm of the couch as they passed through the living room. I've only been here a few weeks. Really? Where you from? Originally. She wrung her fingers. But I lived with my aunt and uncle for a while. Kim crooked his head to the side, asking silently for an explanation. Her mouth opened, ready to try and force the words from her throat, but something stopped her. How was she supposed to get past it all if she kept telling people? No, this time with the pack was her chance to start over. Her chance to be her own person and start her own path. Have you been with the pack long? She asked, turning the subject from herself. If she didn't talk about herself, she wouldn't have to talk about her past. About 10 years now. They talked for a bit after that. Harley had a hard time focusing past the new discovery that so many people had heard of her. It meant all her baggage had already been ripped open and displayed to the masses. After that, she made a somewhat lousy excuse and headed back to her room. The sounds of cheers and laughter following in her wake sobered her. That same night, the pack held a welcome home dinner in the backyard. The entire pack was invited and most, if not all, were in attendance. Tiki lights glittered the backyard and kept the perimeter clean of bugs. If that wasn't enough light, a couple of bonfires crackled and popped near the pool. Lawn chairs had been set up all around. A gentle acoustic soundtrack leaked through the speakers, and the lights from the house casted a golden shadow on the grass. People chatted and socialized around the yard. Harley tried her best to make herself one of them, but after the initial introduction or hello, most of the conversations became nothing more than tense and trying talk. That was the last thing she wanted. Pack members needed to be comfortable with each other. Heck, friends and family needed to be comfortable with each other. If she couldn't even have a little discussion about nonsense topics with the people she was going to be living with, well, she might just be screwed. At some point, she'd ended up at the dessert table by herself, picking through the remnants of the brownie pans and cupcakes for anything salvageable. There wasn't much left but a sugar cookie, which she snagged. Someone appeared by her elbow. Hiya, darlin'. Harley turned, already recognizing the voice. Bailey grinned up at her, her short brown hair spiked somewhat messily. It was always amazing how people with short hair or pixie cuts could work the messy look, while those with long hair normally couldn't. Relief swelled. Hey, Bailey. Brighty up. Bailey grinned, her white teeth contrasting against her tan skin. Good to know you remember me. Harley. Harley moved over toward a chair near the corner of the yard. She glanced behind her to make sure Bailey followed her. She did. Almost immediately, Harley's eyes caught the small but influential group in the corner. Alpha Mark was among them, talking with Beta Oliver and Will. All of them had serious expressions as Oliver gestured animatedly with his hands. Jamie stood there too, her body wrapped around Will's arm like green ivy. "Hey, Harley." Bailey shifted on her seat and leaned forward, elbows on her knees. It caught her off guard at her sudden somberness. "I know this sounds weird, but you know you can trust me, right?" She picked at a thread on her jean shorts. "You can't trust all of us." Harley frowned. "What makes you say that?" She knew she could trust them. Knew that since the second she arrived. Actually doing it, though, was another story. Bailey's eyes flicked away and back. "I've been watching you tonight. Every once in a while you get this look on your face. It's the same look I see on some of back patrollers and hunters, the ones who battles. Like they've seen more than others. It's a haunted look. Makes me worried." Harley schooled her features to cover the surprise she felt. "I'm okay." "I know you are," she said, leaning back in her chair. "But that doesn't mean I don't see you pull back." Pull back. Was Bailey suggesting Harley was the reason she wouldn't be able to fully connect with other pack members? "I don't pull back. You do, though," Bailey said. "And that's okay. I get it." 10 fingers ran through her short hair. Look, Mitch. I just really wanted to say. You don't have to pull back with me. I know it's early, and you've really only known me for a couple of days, but you can trust me." Harley's eyes softened on the tiny girl. For such a small girl, Harley had already seen her toughness, or bravery, the easy way she socialized. And now, she'd seen her softness, her kindness. "Thank you." Bailey's grin appeared once more. "No problem. We should hang out sometime. Darlin', sounds like fun." Later that night, Harley got into some sweats and a tank top and slipped into bed, for once not feeling as quietly alone as she did the night before. Today, she'd made progress. Progress she didn't even know she was making. "Mom, Dad, I'm actually getting somewhere." She fell asleep clutching her butterfly necklace. Chapter for the next morning, Harley went out to find a job. When she was in high school and still living with her Aunt Tracy and Uncle Eric, her job at Toodles of Poodles, a dog grooming place, was the only sunshine in her life. Her co-workers, though most a bit older, were funny and encouraging in the best way. For once in her life, she truly enjoyed working and making an effort to be a part of a team. The paychecks helped a lot, too. Aunt Tracy and Uncle Eric didn't believe in allowances of any sort, so most of her money went toward new clothes and food. It made her feel self-sufficient and responsible. She had slowly become proud of her ability to thrive on her own. Now it was time to get back to it. So she set her alarm for 9 in the morning and suffered through a shower to wake herself up. Her 2 small suitcases were never unpacked, and she rooted carefully through them to find the small, knee-length black skirt. The only skirt she owned. Actually, she paired it with a simple long-sleeved maroon shirt and slipped on her flats. Hopefully that would be enough to provide a good first impression. Jamie was downstairs in the kitchen looking like a perfect advertisement for some preppy and chic store. It made Harley wince at her own outfit. Even with the nice skirt and a brush of mascara, there was no hiding her frizzy brown hair. She'd never quite reached the kind of natural beauty Jamie had, but she'd instead spent her life convincing herself that inner beauty could be so much stronger. She clutched that idea as tight as she could to her chest and didn't let go. Especially when she noticed the other form in the kitchen. He stood near the coffee pot wrapped in the rising warm sunlight streaming through the kitchen window. Cameron was beautiful, but this being sipping from a chipped coffee mug had so much more. Clad in a dark pair of jeans and tight black long-sleeve t-shirt, while Gray looked every piece of muscular perfection that could only come from rigorous exercise. His body reinforced the image of pack hunter. Damn, why couldn't he have been ugly little Willie? When she stepped into the kitchen, both Jamie and Will's eyes flicked to her and then away. Ben Will tensed and flipped his gaze back to her, giving her another inspection. His coffee cup lowered, almost as if he wasn't aware of it. "Harley?" he asked, shocked. Harley Pierce. Although her world tilted and her heart kicked up in her chest, she forced her body to stay relaxed, as if he didn't have a momentous effect on her. Hey, that was her opening line. She internally smacked her own forehead. What was the matter with her? Will looked amused at her response. He set his coffee down on the counter and stepped forward, arms open for a hug. She accepted it somewhat awkwardly, worthy on that familiar of a level. "I heard you were back in town," he said, his chest vibrating under her ear. The smell coming softly off his shirt made Harley weak in the knees. She pulled out of the hug and put a sufficient amount of space between them. From the side, Jamie snorted. "How've you been?" Harley asked politely. It was hard to speak past the bundle of nerves in her stomach. She moved about the kitchen to put together some cereal. It would give her something to do other than stare at Will like an innie. Getting by. Will's voice sounded more like a rumble than anything else. "Yeah," Harley said. It came out soft, filled with emotion. "Will, hell, what are you doing today?" Jamie asked. She leaned delicately against the granite, top tiling in the middle of the kitchen. Harley would have thought she'd forgotten she was there, except Jamie moved out of the way when she took her bowl of cereal to the table. Will placed his now empty mug in the sink. "I've got a few details to go over with Alpha Mark. And I need to drop by my parents' place. Can I come with?" Jamie fluttered her eyelids. She'd probably meant for it to be cute, when really it made Harley think something was in her eye. Harley swallowed past a mouthful of Reese's Puffs. "You don't live with your parents." As soon as the question came out, she wanted to take it back. The man was 24-25. The probability of him still living with his parents had to be small, if not impossible. Instead of making fun of her, though, Will looked at her, bemused. "Not for 3 years, oh." "Harley, you dumbass." She finished up the remainder of her cereal in silence. Then, when she was done, she got back up to put her bowl in the sink. Jamie and Will had conversed about random things, but when Harley got up, Will got up too. "Where are you headed?" he asked her. Headed? How did he know she was going somewhere? He pointed down at her feet. "You have your shoes on." He tilted his head. "And if I remember correctly, you never were one to get up early." She didn't know which surprised her more, the fact that Will remembered her sleeping habits, or his observations. "Is 9 o'clock early?" she asked openly. Will chuckled once. "For you, yes. We used to have to drag you out of bed by your feet for school." Her muscles locked. "Yeah, well," she shook off the old memories. "I have to go into town." He gave a small smile and snatched up a set of keys on the counter. "Perfect. Give me 5 minutes and I'll give you a ride." Did she want a ride from him? Being locked in a car with him might be dangerous. She thought about it. It couldn't hurt, and it was better than taking the bus. Thanks." Will moved into action, heading toward the hallway and out of the kitchen. "Meet me out front." "Will," Jamie called out after him. When he didn't stop for her, she rolled her eyes. "Great." "Thanks, genius." And then, with a bit of wind and perfume, she left too. Guess that meant she would wait out front, while the rogue killer drove a silver Ford. The ride into town from the pack house would take at least 10 minutes of driving through woods and curves. Harley settled into the comfy front seat and buckled her seatbelt. "You live in town, then?" He put a hand on the shoulder of her seat to look behind the car, reversing backwards. Yeah. It was cheap at the time and I was desperate, so. He shrugged, flipping the car into drive. I wouldn't mind a cool place in the forest like the pack house, though. Why were you so desperate to move? She remembered while being a very laid back, go with the flow kid. Desperate and rushed didn't seem like him, although maybe he changed. God knows she did. Pulling onto the main road, Will tapped his fingertips against the steering wheel. After a moment he said, "My parents," as if that perfectly answered the question. It seemed like an answer he didn't want her to push. She got that. Is it a rental? Yeah. Well, if you like the pack house more, why not move in? Will peered through the windshield, squinting against the sun rising further along the horizon. I travel a lot with most of the pack. It can get tiring. Privacy is important. She followed his line of thought. Exactly. Kensington did not have a big population, but it didn't slack either. As such, the town had a decent amount of shops, restaurants, and a total of 2 pharmacies. The town would never draw in a lot of people like the cities, yet it wasn't so small that everyone knew everyone. The town slid right under the radar, which made it the perfect spot for shifters. Was Ford maneuvered onto the road leading to the highlight of the town, the shopping plaza. It stood right next to the barely average-sized outlet mall, ways contained more cars than any other area. "You can drop me off at the mall," Harley told him. "Thanks, Will. I really appreciate it." "No problem." He turned at the next intersection. "I'd rather drive you than see you taking the bus." Something about his words edged turned from the window to peer over at him with a frown. "What's wrong with the bus?" "Nothing," Will assured. "I just worry about her." He barely knew her. "I can protect myself." "I'm sure you can." He used one hand to push up his sleeves. "Don't look at his nicely sculpted forearms." "Don't look at his nicely sculpted forearms. Just trying to make sure you don't have to." The car slowed to a stop and idled next to the sidewalk in front of the mall's favorite retail store. People walked in and out, strolling with a purpose. In the distance a horn honked. For 9:30 in the morning. This place was pretty active. "You're not my keeper, Will." He shook his head with a frown. "Of course. What was I thinking?" A smile grew quickly on his face. He put the car into park. "Seriously, Harley, how have you been?" "Okay," she said honestly. "I've been okay." His smile gentle D. "I hope it'll get better." She had to get out of this car before the man began an interrogation. Or a reminiscing session. The door handle opened smoothly under her grip. "Me too," she said and stepped out. "Thanks for the ride, Will." He spoke again before she could shut the door. "Do you need a ride back? I'll figure something out." "Thanks." "Harley," his face got serious. "Do you need a ride back?" She'd opened her mouth to say no, but he leaned over the middle console to see her better. "I'm not going to let you take the bus. I'll figure something out." She repeated, this time with a slightly tight jaw. "Thanks." Then she shut the door before he could say anything else. If she was going to find a job and make a good impression, it would have to be without thoughts of Will plaguing her mind. Already her past and future were colliding, and she wasn't sure she liked the feelings that came from it. Chapter 5. The excitement foaming through Harley's veins built up until it was all she could do not to break out into a dance in the middle of the busy mall. This was the 3rd day she'd spent job hunting. Yesterday and the day before, she'd spent her time store, hopping and turning in application after application. This morning she'd woken up to a buzzing phone. One of the retail stores wanted her to come in for an early afternoon interview. Without much thought, she had jumped on a bus and gone to the mall. She'd had to pull out all of the personable qualities she had along with her determination and seriousness, but it got her a job. An honest, to goodness minimum wage, paying job. Her training would start later in the week, and then, as of next week, she'd be an official employee. Because of her success, she decided to treat herself to an ice cream cone vanilla, of course before catching the next bus home. Much like any other day, the pack house had a steady stream of activity. Harley smiled at people as they passed her down the hallway into the kitchen. The kitchen was wow. Natalie and a few other women paced around the room preparing food. At the counter, a woman with long blonde hair chopped vegetables while another short, plump woman peeled carrots. Natalie and Cameron had busied themselves by setting the long dining table off to the side. At the moment, Natalie frowned down at one of the place settings. "I think Paul is left-handed," she said. With a tight smile, Cameron switched the silverware settings. Then she blinked and shook her head. "Wait, no he isn't. I'm thinking of Max. Is Max going to be here tonight?" Natalie stared into the distance unseen and tapped her finger on one of the chairs. "I don't think so. Then we're good." Cameron looked relieved. "Let's set a place just in case," she declared, then walked away. Harley had to bite her lip to keep the laugh in. Cameron looked at Connor and looked like he was seriously considering flipping the table. There was a warm atmosphere to this place. Every time she walked into the home, people greeted each other and laughed among themselves. They joked with each other in a way she'd only seen on TV. It was bizarre, this warmth. But she liked it. This pack treated each other like family. Her Aunt Tracy's pack worked around each other. In Tracy's pack, there was a strain with all the members, as if they all merely coexisted with each other. Not to mention the Alpha was never there. Harley had seen Alpha Mark twice since this morning alone. "Natalie, how do you feel about onions?" Will strolled into the kitchen from the pantry, smiling at her almost immediately. "Hey Harley, grilled onions would go perfect with the steak," Natalie said. "Good idea." Will held the onion out to Harley. "Do you mind?" He wanted her to help cook. She didn't know much about cooking at all. He gestured her over to a spot by the stove. "Come on, all you have to do is chop it up." She hesitated. Okay, I guess." After setting her up with a cutting board and a knife, Will stood at the stove to keep an eye on the potatoes and some other mixture there. "So, what did you do today?" Will asked. The onion started making her eyes water. Harley sniffed and wiped a sleeve under her eyes. "I got a job." Will froze. "Is that what you've been out doing?" The tension throughout his frame confused her. "Of course." Will stared at the pot in front of him, saying nothing. Though by the clenched jaw, he appeared as if he really wanted to. If Harley had a wolf, she'd be able to confidently say that Will was angry. Among the pack, a bond was created. A web, if you will, with the Alpha at its dead center. This pack web was critical to the pack. It gave them all a connection to each other. Through this internal bond, the wolves were able to share strength and send warmth and healing to each other. It made them a strong, unbreakable unit. One of her teachers at her Aunt Tracy's pack had tried her best to explain it to her one day. Since wolves craved physical touch and reassurance, this bond provided them the next best thing if they weren't close enough to each other. Shifter wolves were social animals. They liked to share experiences and feelings. Her teacher said they couldn't share thoughts, only feelings. And even feelings her teacher had been quick to point out could only be accessed if one got past the shields in each wolf's mind. The longer one stayed in the pack web, the easier it was to get past these shields. Some mates were even able to share memories, but that was a rare occurrence. If Harley had access to the pack bond, she'd at least get a fleeting idea of how Wolf felt. But she wasn't a shifted wolf, and as such, would never be able to understand just how close a pack could be. Wolf's eyes never left that damn pot. The pack can help you. You know, he finally said. Financially, Harley nodded. She knew exactly what the pack could do for her. They'd offered her all the help she could possibly need, financially and physically. Except letting the pack support her in everything she did felt like a cop-out. They'd already gave her a place to stay, food to eat, the blocks of a family too if she could just build it right. To be honest, she had a small chunk of change that was her inheritance, but after dealing with the estate attorney for almost a year, going to court, and hopping through the red tape that was the insurance company, she didn't want to spend that money unless she absolutely had to. Spending her parents' money felt wrong on two different levels. They died. It wasn't an allowance they were giving her. It was essentially money to help her get over their death. And then there was their memory. After the explosion of her childhood home, she'd lost every single thing she owned except for her butterfly necklace. That money was one of the last few things she had of them. She couldn't spend that money on books and music and t-shirts. It didn't feel right. I'd rather do this the right way, she barely whispered, knowing Will and only he would catch it. He put a gentle, warm hand onto her elbow and squeezed once. Still teary eyes and sniffling, she finished chopping the onions and, after making an excuse to Natalie about not being hungry, she made her escape to her bedroom. At 7:15, there was a knock at her door. She glanced up from her romance book to see Will poke his head in. His eyes softened. Hey. He pushed further into her room, carrying a tray with him. I brought you a plate, he said. I know you said you weren't hungry. The pleasant surprise worked through her. How considerate. Well, Gray had to be the last person she expected to bring her up a plate of food. Not that she expected anyone to in the first place. But if she had to pick someone, she'd choose Natalie. Natalie had that maternal personality. Throughout her stay so far, she'd noticed that the woman had a tendency to look out for each and every pack member with a tender concern. Usually that trait came out in the alpha female, but Harley hadn't seen or heard anything about her. Thank you. She stood to take the tray. Not a problem. Will was already casting his gaze throughout her plain room. There wasn't much in her space except for the basic necessities, a bed, a dresser, a single nightstand. All of her books had been stacked on top of each other on the nightstand. She liked having them close to where she slept. That way, if she ever woke up in the middle of the night on the cresting wave of a nightmare, she could just grab a book and escape into someplace else where she couldn't think too much. How long have you been back? Will asked, strolling to her window with that same prowling grace most of the wolf shifters had. She shrugged. A bit. Maybe 2 weeks. He went silent for a moment as he took in her view out the window. You're planning on staying, right? She quite liked the way the setting sunlight played over his profile. It traced the distinguished curve of his jaw and gave life to his normally dark hair by adding gold. Her eyebrows came together. Of course. Why he jerked a thumb at the floor by her bed. You haven't unpacked your suitcases. She leaned back with a frown. Who knew Will would be so observant, though she should have expected it. An unobservant rogue hunter would not only get absolutely nowhere, but probably killed as well. It was true. She hadn't unpacked her suitcases, but she had shoved them under the bed. So how the hell had he caught that? I'll get there eventually, she said quietly. After setting the tray onto her lap, she picked gently at the arrangement of steak, potatoes, and vegetables. It was very nice for the pack to feed her like this. When she stayed with Aunt Tracy and Uncle Eric, most of her meals came out of easily heat-table containers. Aunt Tracy wasn't the best cook. She instead would rather spend her time focusing on her financial records or watching reruns of Drive. Phil, this pack would spoil her. Will turned and leaned against the wall, making himself comfortable. So, are you reading? She eyes him as she chewed a bite of steak. Was Will planning to stay and watch her eat? Or did he simply want to chat? He only waited, his eyebrows rising in a challenge, daring her to kick him out. She swallowed her tiny bite before speaking. It's a contemporary romance. I see you as more of a fantasy type of girl. Fantasy, where vampires kidnapped unsuspecting girls and shifters created havoc among civilizations. I've had enough fantasy in my lifetime. A loaded statement. She looked down at her fork, scraping at her plate to avoid the sadness she knew would be in his eyes as he digested her words. I'm not much of a reader myself. He continued on, as if she hadn't just flashed him a piece of her hurt. Wish I was, though. I like it, she said, then took another bite. Will waited until she finished her whole place before finally taking his leave. Here, I'll take it downstairs for you. She handed him the whole tray. Thanks. Tomorrow we will talk about this job you got, he said as he turned his back to go to the door. She didn't like the way he said that. It sounded, Father is H. Protective. As if it was more of a command than a request. Tomorrow we will be talking about your job. Did he think he was her older brother? Will stopped in the doorway, his hand on the door as he glanced over his shoulder. Hey, Harley. She shot down the indignant feelings churning in her stomach before replying. Yeah. His head tilted to the side, a wolf gesture, and flicked his eyes quickly to her suitcases. Work on unpacking those suitcases. The door clicked quietly shut behind him. Thank you so much for joining me in this obsession with werewolves. I hope you've had a great time and can't wait to come back for more. Remember to subscribe, leave your comments, and share this passion with others. Until next time, keep being obsessed.